Hungry dogs run fast.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into my dog's favorite podcast, the Dynasty Dogs, brought to you by the Double FU for You. That is the fantasy football universe. I am your host for this evening and the only person here this evening, Michael Anthony. You could find me at Dynasty Dog Mike on X is what it's called now. Got a very, very fun episode because, ladies and gentlemen, boys and squirrels, we have NFL football going on starting tonight. Then tomorrow, then we have a full slate on Sunday and Monday. We are jam-packed. It's going to be a fun week, fun weekend. I can't believe football is finally here. I'm super excited for it. Obviously, the Philadelphia Eagles play tonight. We'll be talking about that here shortly. But first, we have to get into That Bites segment. That is our news and notes of what's going on around the league, other than, obviously the season is starting. So here is our little graphic for that. Forgot to hit that button at the beginning. But first bit of news we have here is that Jakobi Meyers requested to be traded and was just told no. And that was the end of that. So Raiders signed Amari Cooper just about, I think, 10 days ago. And then Amari decided to retire today. So I imagine this is the best possible outcome for both parties when it comes to Jakobi Meyers and it comes to the Las Vegas Raiders. He is the best wide receiver on that team, not pass catcher, because that belongs to Brock Bowers. But I think Jakobi Meyers is a very solid wide receiver too for an NFL franchise. And he's a good wide receiver for that team and that Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly led offense with Geno Smith, who can sling it as a quality pass catcher beside Brock Bowers. I do think we might see a little bit of a downtick from Jakobi's past two seasons as a wide receiver too. I think we'll be closer to wide receiver 3 this year, just because of the running game that the Raiders will try to have with Ashton Genty now that he's there. But again, I think this is the best possible outcome for both parties involved because he is in a contract here and he has the opportunity to make himself a decent amount of money. That is Jakobi Meyers in the offseason, whether that is with the Las Vegas Raiders or with another franchise. I would be very interested to see what happens with him. I would like to see him stay in Vegas, add another quality pass catcher wide receiver beside him other than Brock Bowers. And obviously there's a lot of buzz around Thornton, the 6'5" wide receiver who runs a 4.3 speed. I'm a little hesitant about him. I think he's got the speed. He's got the size. I don't know if the route running ability is fully there just yet. He benefited greatly from a Tennessee wide open offense and still didn't produce all that much in college. Will the Raiders be able to scheme him open, help him develop? Maybe, possibly, but I still think the best wide receiver there and the wide receiver to own on that team, because I've seen a lot of buzz about Thornton, is Jakobi Meyers. I think Meyers is still readily, cheap. You can get him for second round picks. I think I talked about this on the Dynasty DNA show that I do, the Triple Threat podcast. I would trade Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt or Bill Krosky for Jakobi Meyers straight up. And I feel very confident about that, as the Meyers could be a good wide receiver 3 or a flex option week in and week out for your fantasy team. And there's big question marks about Bill Krosky right now with his role in the depth chart. Obviously, depth charts don't mean anything until actual football is played, right? So, but in reality, I know what Jakobi is. I don't know what Bill is just yet. Next bit of news. Something I'd kind of been saying all offseason is that Jaylen Warren is going to have a role in this offense. I know everybody wanted to give the reins to Caleb Johnson, and all the Caleb Johnson hive was out there telling us that, the Broncos brought in J.K. Dobbins because R.J. Harvey is this, that, and the third, blah, blah, blah. Well, Jaylen Warren just signed an extension through 2027 with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Jaylen Warren's an explosive back. He's a tough back. He is a good pass-catching back. I think he adds a different dimension to what Caleb Johnson is, in between the tackles runner. And, he's a little bit more creative as a runner than Caleb Johnson, in my opinion. Watching Caleb Johnson's film, I've talked about it ad nauseum here, is that there was a lot of wide open lanes for him at Iowa. If you go check PFF, Iowa was one of the best rush protecting teams in all of college football last year. Then he brings them over to Pittsburgh, and they were one of the worst rushing protecting teams in the whole NFL last year. So be very interesting to see. I think Jaylen Warren's a very quality back. Could be a guy who finishes as an RB2, probably towards the top half if he gets a full complement of work, especially with the pass catching that he has. I think he could be, running back 18 to 20. That's decent outcome for him. Maybe even running back 15. I think that's definitely doable. Very interesting to see what this Pittsburgh offense looks like. I'm very concerned about it because I don't think Aaron Rodgers is the answer. I don't think, I think DK Metcalf is very solid. I think he needs somebody else out there to help him create because he's just a big bully type wide receiver, a really good monster, athletic freak kind of guy. But they don't really have anybody out there in Pittsburgh that complements him well. I don't believe in Roman Wilson. Kind of have a little faith in Calvin Austin. Then they have like 17 tight ends that I don't know which one is which or which one's going to be relevant any week. But Jaylen Warren, very acquirable, much cheaper, probably even less than what you would spend for Jacoby Myers. Early third, late second probably gets it done for Jaylen Warren. And if you are a competing team, that is exactly what you want. You want running backs. Obviously I am worried about this offensive line, but this is a guy who's been in this offense, who's been explosive. So I don't mind, giving that out for Jaylen Warren, especially with how cheap it is compared to Caleb Johnson. You're still going to have to give up a late first, early second for him. So that's very interesting there. And then the last bit of news before we get into the football conversation, the games ahead, is we just talked about last week how Adam Thielen was traded to the Minnesota Vikings. And then we all got excited about Jalen Coker. Jalen Coker is going to be the guy in the slot. Jalen Coker is going to have more of a role. I myself, even last week, was super excited about Jalen Coker. Well, Jalen Coker goes to the IR out of nowhere. Then they re-signed Renfro, and Renfro kind of becomes interesting in that Adam Thielen type role. Am I going out in there and trading for Renfro? No. Would he have probably been a waiver addition maybe within the past few days, few weeks? Probably. I don't know if that's true. Obviously, this is all hypothesis at this time. I don't know if that's the right fucking word, but I didn't expect to go into this conversation. It just kind of came back into my head that they were just upset with the way he came into camp, and he's been working ever since. But everything you read about Coker, other than that, has been extremely positive. Good big play threat, can run routes, got a guy who just wins, can win at all levels of the field. That's why I was excited for him to get this Adam Thielen role, but it doesn't look like that is going to be happening anytime in the next at least 4 weeks. He is headed to the IR. But like my shirt says, Slim Reaper, we obviously have to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles playing the Dallas Cowboys tonight. That is Thursday evening. This is going to be a fun game, in my opinion. Some things I want to bring up, and we'll start with the Dallas Cowboys side of things first. Actually, I will say the Eagles are 8.5-point favorites at home here in Philadelphia. But what I will say is on the Dallas Cowboys side, I am concerned about Micah Parsons, his departure from the Dallas Cowboys, what that defense is going to look like. There is a guy on that defensive line that I'm very intrigued about. I don't think it happens right away, especially with the Eagles offensive line. Is Donovan Ezaraku from Boston College. I've talked about him a couple times on this podcast. Very good, high motor type defensive end / linebacker. So I'll be interested to see what he looks like tonight. Will he get a bit of a role? But again, this is going to be a really tough offensive lineup matchup for him to face against as a rookie in his first game. So that'll be interesting to see. But again, this defense in general is not very good in the Dallas Cowboys. Without Micah Parsons, they kind of miss that pass rush. So I think that's going to, obviously, Deron Bland and Trayvon Diggs have kind of benefited from a good pass rush. They've been able to make some really nice plays, some great interceptions. I think they might be a little bit over their head, this week with the Devontae Smith and AJ Brown. But on the offensive side of the Dallas Cowboys, I'm very intrigued with anybody other than the running back situation in Dallas. I want to specifically talk about George Pickens. This is the guy I've been talking about ad nauseum for years. If you follow the Dynasty Dogs for the 2.5 years we've been a podcast, I think this could be the game that we have been waiting for George Pickens for quite some time. This is obviously the best quarterback situation he has had in his entire career as an NFL talent. I am very interested to see what he looks like. And if you guys have not been following along with the Philadelphia Eagles as I have, the cornerback 2 situation has been in quite a flux. They had a lot of high hope for Keely Ringo, the rookie pick from a few years ago from Georgia, to be their outside corner alongside Quinyon Mitchell. That really hasn't taken effect just yet. And they brought in a couple free agents that just haven't really, taken control of that cornerback 2 spot on the outside. And I really think George Pickens can take advantage of that. Obviously, you have Quinyon Mitchell, who will take the one side away, hopefully, as an Eagles fan, hopefully. CeeDee Lamb is a guy who lines up everywhere, slot, outside. Cooper DeJean is a guy who's going to mostly play in the slot, nickel corner type position. So George Pickens has the opportunity to absolutely blow up in this game. Right now, George Pickens is about a late first acquiring player where you could get him for like the 110. I think if tonight hits the way I think it might, because Dallas, first of all, mentioning their defense, they're going to have to throw the football to stay in this game. And I think George Pickens is a matchup nightmare for the cornerback situation in Philadelphia. I could see a double-digit output from George this week. 15 plus, I don't think is out of the realm of possibility. Over 20, I definitely, I would call that not a hot take if he were to hit that over 20 points this week. I'm very intrigued by his matchup. His price for fantasy might just go up slightly here. So if you're not a George Pickens believer after this week, this could be the prime time to sell. But if you're a George Pickens believer right now, right before this game kicks off in just about an hour and 10 minutes, roughly, whatever it is, I would go out and put your trade offers out there now, because this could be the game that we have been waiting for George Pickens. Again, defense is bad. Running game is bad. That means the passing game will be the focal point of this offense. And when the Eagles secondary is depleted as it is right now, they're not even just, I forgot to even mention the scrambling at safety that they have. They're talking about Sidney Brown and Andrew Makuba rotating in and out at the safety position. So a guy at a deep vertical threat like George Pickens could absolutely take advantage of something like that with a safety game in flux. So very, very interesting to see what that looks like. And obviously, CeeDee Lamb is just going to be himself. He will be heavily targeted, whether this is a big game for him or not. He's still going to have, the respectable 15 points per, he's going to have, just because the amount of targets he's going to get as one of the best wide receivers in all of football, and the way they move him around the formation. CeeDee Lamb is still going to be him. I want to flip to the Eagles side on offense. I just talked about the defensive issues. The offensive side of the football is completely the opposite, right? You still have Saquon Barkley. You still have Jalen Hurts. You still have AJ Brown. But the guy I want to talk about is a guy, again, another dude I've been talking about ad nauseum. He was my dog tag for the Philadelphia Eagles just a few weeks ago, and that is going to be Devontae Smith. In the 8 games Devontae Smith has played against the Dallas Cowboys, he has a total of 6 touchdowns. 2 of those games are multi-touchdown games. So that is going to be super exciting. And again, this Dallas pass rush is not going to be what it normally is without Michael Parsons. So look for the Eagles to be able to air it out this week and test Deron Bland. And I think that is a beneficial matchup for a guy like Devontae Smith. I have an anytime touchdown parlay for Devontae. I have 2 parlays in, and both of them are anytime TDs for Devontae Smith in this game. So if I lose, it's going to be because of that, right, in both parlays. So I'm very intrigued by Devontae Smith in this one. I do think the Eagles win this. The score is going to look closer, I think, than the game actually is. Obviously, this is week one. Really, anything can happen. But I think the Dallas offense is as good as it's been in recent years, in a long time. To be honest with you, with Dak, CD, George, Jake Ferguson, not a bad option. I am very intrigued by the Eagles linebackers with Zach Bond and Jahad Campbell. That might give Jake Ferguson a little bit of a problem. But the outside wide receiver position, George Pickens, is where we're going to watch this. But so again, for this game, really keep your eyes peeled to George Pickens and Devontae Smith, a real matchup of the wide receiver twos who are probably wide receiver ones on any team. George Pickens in Pittsburgh still was a wide receiver one, as much as that was painful to go through, right? Like I said, Eagles pull this one out. This will be a fun game. I do think there's going to be some offense, in this one. Contrary to most first weeks that we have year in and year out, I do think there's going to be some offense to this one. I took the over at 48.5. That might be a bit high, but I just see an offensive onslaught in this game. So again, what I'm focusing on for Dynasty is George Pickens and Devontae Smith. Keep an eye on both of those players. Let's move on to Friday night's matchup in Brazil. Overseas games are usually pretty hard to kind of predict. With the games in England and stuff like that, they're not usually the high scoring affairs that we kind of look for. But I am very interested in this one, especially because we have an upgraded offense in the Chargers. We have a more except without Rashee Rice, what we were hoping for, a more explosive Kansas City offense this year. But Kansas City is favored at -3. The player I'm looking at for this offense is going to be one Xavier Worthy. Has a real chance to show that he is more than just a gimmicky wide receiver, more than just a vertical threat, more than just to take the top off a defense kind of player. I do expect them to move him around, let him be more of the route runner that he has been, that we've seen him do. I'm very positive about what we saw at the end of the season there. Sorry, that took me a few seconds to spit that one out. But in the last 3 games, or the last 4 games, weeks 14 through 17, and I'm including the week with the Chargers, Xavier Worthy had 18.2 points per game, puts him towards, I believe it was wide receiver 16 or 14 in that span. I forgot to jot that down, but he was towards the top half of wide receiver 2 numbers. And that's very positive outcome for what people were talking about. He was just, he's a first round, but all he is a speed threat. All he is this. All he is that. I don't see that. I think that they're going to take the training wheels off of Xavier Worthy in this one. They are going to kind of turn the clock back to this explosive offense that the Kansas City Chiefs have had in recent years, up until probably 3-4 years ago, and they really started to become kind of defensive minded and run the ball type, and then just feed Travis Kelce. So I really think that Xavier Worthy is the guy to watch in this. Will he ever be a wide receiver 1 over Rashee Rice? From a prospect standpoint, I liked Xavier Worthy's film a lot more than Rashee Rice. But from an NFL aspect, what we've seen with Rashee Rice has been a very good, very, very good wide receiver 1 for fantasy purposes. I think these two can coexist almost like, an A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. I'm not comparing them, but like a Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison type. I think both these guys could be great wide receiver options for our dynasty rosters. And again, they have the best quarterback in all of football throwing the football to them. So Xavier Worthy, a guy I'm going to be locked into Friday night, really has a chance to take over. Really has a chance to be a wide receiver 1 on the week, to be honest with you, especially with the big playability that they have. I really was hoping that we'd see Jalen Royals in this game playing the slot role, but unfortunately, he's out this week with knee tendonitis. But I want to flip it over to the Chargers side. I kept it out of that bite segment, but Najee Harris will play in this game. But according to Rich Eisen, Omarion Hampton will be the starting running back for the Chargers. I don't know if he didn't really mention if that was just for this week going forward, or what the plan is for that running back rotation in LA going forward after week 1. But I'm very intrigued by Omarion Hampton this week. He is this is a tough matchup. I can't lie. This is one of those ones where I wish it was a better week one matchup for him. The Chiefs defense with Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, just very able to stop the run. One of the best teams in one of the best teams at not giving up fantasy points per game to the running back position. So this is going to be a tough draw for him, but he's going to get a bulk load of the carries, in my opinion, because Najee Harris has not been able to practice for quite some time since his, I believe it was 4th of July mishap. I don't even think I've seen a video without Najee wearing sunglasses at this point. So I think, with getting, probably 20 plus carries this game and a few catches, we still could see a really respectable outcome from Omarion Hampton, even with the negative matchup that he has with the Kansas City Chiefs. I also want to see what this offense looks like with Trey Harris and Keenan Allen, right? And Ladd McConkey, obviously, we all knew who that is. But those two are relatively new additions to this offense. Obviously, Keenan Allen has played for the Chargers for a long time, but this is a new offense. This is something he's going to have to learn, and I imagine he's going to figure it out quickly because he's been one of the most, underrated wide receivers we've seen in a long time, and that is Keenan Allen. But I'll talk about Trey Harris a little later. I am just very interested to see what this Chargers offense looks like at whole week one. I think they might just be a little outmatched in this one, week one, going into Brazil, coming up against the Chiefs team that lost to the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl, probably wants to come in and kick the door down week one. So I would look for the Chiefs to take this one. It's, -3. They are favored right now. I could see that keeping it close, but I do think the Chiefs end up winning this. And again, the guys I'm watching are mostly Xavier Worthy and Omarion Hampton. We'll move on to the next game here. And speaking of Omarion Hampton, I've been seeing a lot of recently this Travion Henderson versus Omarion Hampton for Dynasty. And I get it. Travion's very fun. He's very explosive. He's a different type of running back than Omarion Hampton is, right? To a certain extent. I'm still not at the point where I'm putting Travion over Omarion Hampton. I had Hampton as the better running back in my pre-draft evaluation. The draft capital matches that for me, so I'm still in Omarion Hampton. I have tried in 3 separate locations to flip Travion Henderson for Omarion Hampton straight up. The 3 responses I got were, I'm good, LOL, what was it, no thank you, and the third one was add a second. And by the way, I'm not adding a second on to Travion Henderson to get Omarion Hampton at these times, because the value has flipped in such a way that, maybe a few weeks ago I would have done that, right? But the value of Dynasty has not played out that way. I think Travion Henderson, if you were to ask a lot of people in rookie drafts, if rookie drafts were to happen today, Travion might go ahead of Omarion Hampton. And I think that could be fool's gold, right? I think that, we made the right decisions originally in this, in this rookie-based system that we have going on here. I'm not saying both of these guys won't be extremely productive. I think both of these guys have top 12 Dynasty running back upside. But I think we're putting the cart before the horse. I say this ad nauseum all the time, that putting the cart before the horse in Dynasty leads you to being in a hole for, quite some time sometimes. So you definitely got to be careful of that. But let's talk about this game. The Pats are at 2.5-point favorites in this game. This is Mike Vrabel's first attempt as a head coach with the New England Patriots. Obviously, this is not his first attempt at being a head football coach, but this is his first game as a New England Patriots head football coach, going up against Pete Carroll, who is the new head football coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. I almost said the Oakland Raiders, but, that's going to take some getting used to. So this will be a very fun matchup, in my opinion. These are 2 teams that have a lot to prove, right? The Vegas Raiders are bringing in a decorated head football coach in Pete Carroll, who is not of the age to be losing, right? Who really wants to win as soon as possible. So I think that this could be a very fun game, right? Especially with 2 offenses that we are very heavy Dynasty invested in with Drake May, with Ashton Genty, with Brock Bowers. Those are three top guys from the two most recent drafts. And this is going to be a fun matchup. On the Patriots side of the ball, obviously, we just talked about Travion Henderson and how good I think he is, and I still think he's going to be very, very good. He's got a plus matchup. But who I really want to talk about is Drake May, right? A guy you're getting in the second round of a lot of your startups in this offseason. I think he's going to be the ones that start to get closer to a first-round startup pick than he is a second-round startup pick or a mid-second-round pick like he is right now. And this could start right as soon as this week. The Vegas Raiders last year giving up 20 points per game to the quarterback position, over 20 points per game to the quarterback position. And this is a guy in Drake May who was productive with a really bad offense last year, right? Who got upgrades everywhere this year, who was in and out of the lineup with concussions. That's one big thing about Drake May. He's going to have to stay healthy, right? That is going to be something we're going to have to worry about. What I'm excited about is Will Campbell at left tackle now. Stephon Diggs, who, I had some doubts about coming into this year. We talked about this. Rich has been pounding the table for Stephon Diggs. I've been on the negative side of that, but, all reports are he looks healthy. He looks good. He's ready to go week one. I think Stephon Diggs gets fed in this matchup against the Vegas Raiders secondary. I think Hunter Henry's another sneaky start. I've been pounding that table for quite some time. But yeah, then again, like I said, Drake May at the end of this year will be in the conversation of, would he be the 112, 111 pick? Maybe even higher than that. Drake May has the capability to be one of those top end scorers just because of the rushing upside, just because of the arm talent that he displays. I just think we're a year away from that, to be honest with you. I think they need to add another quality pass catcher to this offense. There were rumors about bringing in Jacoby Myers, and I think that would be perfect for Drake May. Maybe the Patriots shouldn't have let him go the first time, to be honest with you. But, I'm very interested to see how Drake May looks in this Mike Vrabel offense, and this Josh McDaniels offense for that matter, because he is the offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots. Now, and then on the Vegas side, obviously I talked ad nauseum about Jacoby Myers and how good I think he is. But then there's Brock Bowers, who continues to be the tight end one for Dynasty, is probably, if not the best tight end in all of football right now. Continues his should hopefully continue his second year strong with this matchup against New England, because this New England defense is still probably a few year or two away. By the way, Jacoby Myers is a very good start this week again. I just talked about that, but Christian Gonzalez doesn't look to be playing this week. So I would imagine Jacoby Myers is going to have a very favorable matchup there as well. But, Brock Bowers, Ashton Genty, these guys are all full go. I think this offense is going to be, I don't want to say a top offense with the Raiders, but I think it'll definitely be improved from what it was last year. It could be a middling offense, one of those offenses that is between, 15 to 16 in points per game and passing yards, possibly even rushing yards. I think Ashton Genty's going to have a good season. I don't think, he's going to have like a top 5 season. I don't think I'm there yet. Top 10, I think, is absolutely doable with the first round talent that he is in that offense with Pete Carroll, who loves to run the football. We've seen Pete Carroll feed one running back for years. So I am very excited about that. Rocco, I'm just seeing this message. I apologize. Yes, it is a solo pod. This is me talking to myself for God knows how long. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, want me to tell me to fuck off, you do whatever you need to do. But yeah, that should be an interesting matchup. I'm very interested to see how that looks. And then let's get into the next one here. This is the Tennessee Titans versus the Denver Broncos. The Broncos are 7.5-point favorite at home. This is a shitty spot for Cam Ward's first week, right? I think Cam Ward is a very good quarterback. I had a hot take. Actually, forgot to mention, I will be doing hot takes at the end of this episode. I have several per position that I want to go over, so we'll get to that. But one of my hot takes I posted on Twitter recently is that Cam Ward has a top 15 fantasy football season. That does not start this week. I do think, the Denver Broncos with Pat Surtain and them guys are a really tough draw, especially in Denver. Mile High City, the Mile High Air is going to be something that he's going to have to deal with right off the bat, week one. Very interested to see what that looks like. But I really want to flip this over to, the Denver Broncos offense with the second year of Bo Nix. Has a favorable matchup against the Tennessee Titans. I do think the Titans have somewhat improved this defense, but, I don't think they're there yet. Bo gets some new targets in Pat Bryant, Evan Ingram. Might talk about him later when it comes to hot takes. RJ Harvey, J.K. Dobbins. I'm very interested to see what this Denver Broncos offense looks like. Who gets the bulk of the carries? Who gets the pass catching work in the Denver Broncos running back rotation? Will it be RJ Harvey? Will it be J.K. Dobbins? The plus matchup for either one of those guys, the Tennessee Titans gave up the third most fantasy points to the running back position. So whoever is that guy in Denver, it has a very good chance to be one of the top options in fantasy this week, right? There have been some negative reports about RJ Harvey in pass protection, but I did see something right before I came on here. His offensive coordinator says he looks much better than he did. So that's plus, right? That could just be coach speak. I'm trying not to speaking a little hopium out there, right? But RJ Harvey is a dangerous football player, not just from a running back standpoint, as a pass catching standpoint, as an explosive playmaker standpoint. And then you got J.K. Dobbins. Like SC and I talked about this a few weeks ago, thunder and lightning, but I find J.K. Dobbins more of the fake lightning at the Rainforest Cafe, where it's not really real. You might feel like it's real, but it's not, right? We'll give you some flash weeks, but then all of a sudden he's unfortunately on the injury report because he's never had a healthy season in his entire NFL career. But I think year two of Bo might look a little different than year one of Bo. Bo came out firing as a rookie quarterback. I don't think we might have seen Bo Nix's ceiling last year, in my opinion, just because Bo is not going to have to rush as much as he did last year, over 500 some odd yards, which is not something I foresaw in his game. Obviously, it could have been added. It could be something that he didn't really have to do in college. So, he was able to do it more in the pros. But he's not going to have to do it this year, right? They added 2 running backs for a reason. They added new pass catchers. Last year, they were kind of starving for both of those positions outside of Courtland Sutton. So Bo, in my opinion, might have seen his ceiling. Again, I'm not saying Bo's going to be a bad quarterback by any stretch of imagination. What he did last year could, just be his ceiling, and he could just be a very solid quarterback too for our fantasy rosters going forward, kind of in that ilk of a more mobile Jared Goff type quarterbacks, right? Who, and that's probably bad option there because we've seen Goff be a quarterback 1, but you guys are understanding what I'm saying. Quarterback 13 through 15 feels pretty consistent for Bo in his quarterback career, especially with Sean Payton being the offensive coordinator. So year 2 of Bo, the first week of Bo Nix at home is going to be something I'm going to be paying attention to heavily, especially with this favorable matchup. The next game, or actually the last game I have here for y'all, is one of the fondest ones, and that is going to be Monday night's matchup of the Chicago Bears versus the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings are 1.5-point favorites in Chicago, and I am kind of surprised by that. Usually when teams are favored as away teams, that's kind of eye-opening to me, right? But as the high potent offense with Justin Jefferson, obviously, with TJ Hawkinson, with Aaron Jones. So this is not a knock on that team, but I think we forget how good the Bears defense and the Vikings defense, for that matter, were against the quarterback position last year. Both of those defenses were top 5 in points given up, or the least amount of points given up to the quarterback position. So both of these teams were able to contain the quarterback position pretty well last year. So, and by the way, the Bears have Jaquan Brisker back at safety, a guy who missed a lot of time last year with injuries. So I look for this defense to even look better than it did last year with Brisker back. I think this is going to be a hard matchup for J.J. McCarthy in Chicago, week 1. The frozen tundra of Chicago, even though it is September, it's not frozen yet, could be a tough ask for him week 1. And then I want to flip it over to the Bears side because, again, Minnesota's defense, nothing to be fucked with either, again, in the top 5 at points given up to the quarterback position. But then somehow we're one of the worst teams against points given up to the wide receiver position. So I think my main focus of this game is not going to be Caleb Williams, because I'm going to talk about him here shortly when it comes to hot takes. But Rome Odunze is going to be the guy, and he's been my guy all offseason. This is the week that Rome shows to the world that he is a wide receiver 1 in Chicago. Like I mentioned, the Minnesota Vikings were one of the worst teams against a wide receiver position in fantasy football last year. I think all signs point to Rome being a wide receiver 1 in week 1, and that's just going to keep the hot streak going, right? And I think Chicago pulls this one out. I think we are kind of underestimating Chicago as a football team right off the bat. I know if Rocco's still listening, he might have cut me off already. He's not going to be happy to hear that. But I really think the Chicago Bears are one of the best teams in the NFC North. So that's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out in that matchup. Let's get into my hot takes for each position I have here. My first hot take, and I've mentioned it ad nauseum, is Brock Purdy is not a top 15 quarterback for fantasy football this year. Everyone's going to tell me, that he did it last year with the injuries, with whatnot, and I know obviously that's data points, that's odds in your favor that he could do it again. But this team is progressively getting older, right? This is a team that its wide receiver room now. It seems like Jennings is going to play, and I believe he just got a contract too. Should have been into that bite segment. That's all coming back to me as I'm speaking. So I do not think that Brock Purdy has it in his cards to do it again this year. This is going to be a tough ask for him with the amount of injuries that they have, with how old they are getting, with CMC getting older, another year older, coming off of pretty severe injury last year. I think George Kittle's going to be just absolutely fine. But then I don't know about the wide receivers. I don't know if they have a wide receiver 1 in that offense without Brandon Ayuk. And he starts off the year on the IR with a pup. I forget which one it was, but it's going to be a tough ask. And I also say this because I think there's going to be resurgence and a surgence of quarterbacks that finished outside the top 15 last year that could overtake Brock Purdy. We got a guy, Dak Prescott, who plays tonight, could start on that trajectory tonight. We got a guy in Caleb Williams, who I fully believe is a top 15 fantasy scorer this year. Drake May, with a full season, with a better options, with a rushing upside. Michael Penix, you heard it here first. Or last. I don't know when the fuck I said it. Then you got just a plethora of guys that really I think could overtake, and then you've got the normal top 15 guys, the Patrick Mahomes, the Josh Allens, the Lamar Jacksons, things like that. Which is why I think Brock Purdy gets pushed out, where other guys jump in, and the other top guys are the top guys. My second one is Caleb Williams will be a top 8 fantasy scorer in points per game this year. I am very excited for Caleb. How I'm pulling up my actual notes here before I get this completely wrong. But, this is actually a two-parter. He will not only be a top 8 fantasy scorer in points per game, he will hit 4,000 yards passing this season. I think I said this is rookie season, really from 4,000 yards passing aspect. But I'm betting on it again. I believe in the talent. I believe in Ben Johnson. I believe that Caleb has the ability to be one of the top quarterbacks for fantasy, could be one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL. again. So he will hit 4,000 yards passing, and he will be top 8 in points per game. Last year, he was sacked 68 times. Matt Eberflus is gone, and he still had its respectable 20 TDs to 6 interceptions. And then, mind you, this is a little fun fact. He rushed for 489 yards rushing last year, which is 7th among the quarterback position. But he is the only one in the top 17 quarterbacks to not have a rushing touchdown. So the quarterbacks that all finished in the top 17 had touchdowns except for Caleb Williams. And that is shocking because this is a guy who can make plays with his legs. I do expect him to score on the ground this year at least once or twice. And that would boost his points per game total up, right? I think like I mentioned earlier, Rome Odunze is set to take the next step. Ben Johnson, a head coach, an innovative, that's the word, play caller for the Detroit Lions last year, steps into this offense with just an abundance of talent. DJ Moore, Rome, DeAndre Swift, Colston Loveland, Cole Kmet, Luther Burden, who I think is a very solid wide receiver. There should be no reason Caleb Williams shouldn't hit the 4,000 mark, yet a top 8 in points per game player this year. And again, this is another guy that you're getting in the mid-second, late second of your startups that will take, I believe, the next step into the top of the second round or into the first round of startups this year. My next one is going to be, and this is going to be for running backs now. We're moving on to the running back position. Devin Neal will become the Saints running back 2 by the time this season is over. Why do I say that? This is a new regime in Kellen Moore in New Orleans. This is a wanting to get his guys involved take. This is a Saints team that is going to be bad, which means that Devin Neal could be more involved towards the end of the season. This is also an aspect that they could move on to from Alvin Kamara in the middle of the season before the trade deadline. They could move on from Kendre Miller. And actually, this is probably a hot take of and of itself. I don't know if you guys will agree with me, disagree with me. If you have comments, like I said, feel free to say whatever you want. I believed Devin Neal was a better prospect. And maybe that's just recency bias. He's a better prospect than Kendre Miller. Maybe that's recency bias, like I said. But just remembering what I saw from Kendre, he was a really good running back, a home run hitting type running back. But just Devin Neal's smoothness as a running back, right? A high contributor throughout his career in college football, from the time he was a freshman all the way to the time he declared for the NFL draft. Kendre Miller was a very productive back. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see much from him this preseason because he had an injury. Not something I'm super concerned about because it is not something I don't think we had to deal with in his time in college. But then that is something we had to deal with Kendre Miller throughout his NFL career, right? And I'm not going to say here he's going to lose his job to Devin Neal because of injuries. You never want to predict injuries for a player. That's disrespectful. It's sad, right? But, this is a guy who's ended up on the hot seat in Kendre Miller with the previous regime. Gus Bradley was constantly cutting promos on this dude, right? Saying, we need to see more from him. Just, being a heel to poor Kendre Miller. So that is why I think this is the perfect storm for Devin Neal to take over that running back too. Just his overall ability to play the position. Nothing he does is extraordinary. Nothing he does is bad. He's just a damn good football player. And I think that will lead him to be, the RB2 at worst by the time this season is over. He could even end up being the RB1 if Alvin Kamara's moved on. Who knows? I do think one of the two, Kamara or Miller, is moved by the end of this season. My second hot take, and this is probably the hottest take of them all that I have, and I do believe it's possible, but very unlikely. And that's what hot takes are. I think we need to realize that hot takes are what they are fucking called for a reason. Hot takes, right? These are not like, cold takes. These are not easy takes. These are hot for a reason. They're supposed to be caliente, right? I predict that Bijan Robinson will surpass CMC's 2019 season and become the second highest fantasy scorer in fantasy history. I left LT because LaDainian Tomlinson has the most points in fantasy, but comparing decades, I don't really love doing that. But I think Bijan has a major possibility to do that. He would have to hit over 29 points per game, like CMC did to do this. During his 3-game stretch with Michael Penix was over 26 points per game. So he would obviously have to boost those numbers, but this is an offseason with a, Michael Penix at the helm. This is a running back that's going to have a top 4 easiest schedule for the position in Bijan Robinson. So predicting he doesn't absolutely just take over the NFL by storm this year is not out of the realm of possibility, right? Do I think this one is likely to happen? Probably not, but it's in the realm of possibility. Like I mentioned, he's got the 4th easiest schedule. Penix has a top 10 schedule for the QB position. So he could just keep checking it down to Bijan Robinson and make things happen for him. And this is the best quarterback that not only Drake London has played with, but Bijan Robinson has played with, right? So they're not going to be able to stack the box on a guy like Bijan like they were able to with the corpse of Kirk Cousins and, oh, God, Desmond Ridder. What an absolute train wreck that was. So Bijan's going to have some open lanes, right? And I think the Atlanta offense and the Atlanta football team, the Atlanta Falcons football team is trending in the right direction. This is a scary football team, in my opinion. They were towards the top end of points scored last year in yards. But if you sat down and watched the Atlanta Falcons with Kirk Cousins at the helm, they did not seem right. They did not seem fluid. I think Michael Penix changed some things those last 3 weeks, and now we get a full season of Penix at the helm. And I think that just speaks, how well this season could go for Bijan Robinson in this offense. So Bijan will overtake CMC's 2019 fantasy points per game this year. That is my hottest take that I have. But let's get into the wide receiver position here. And I said it a few weeks ago. Calvin Ridley will be a top 15 scorer, but let's knock it up a notch. He will be a top 10 fantasy scorer this year. Calvin Ridley, I think that he is the best option of being this year's Terry McLaurin. I think he is due for a double-digit touchdown year with Cam Ward, and you guys know I have all the faith in the world in Cam Ward, and it might just be hopium faith, but I think Cam Ward has the moxie, the talent, the play style to give Calvin Ridley the best possible outcome that we haven't really seen in some years since his time in Atlanta before he got suspended and all that nonsense. But I think double-digit touchdowns is not the realm of possibility. Top 8 finish is definitely feels about right. We saw what he kind of started to do at the end of the season last year. With who was the quarterback after Will Levis, whose name is escaped? Was it Mason Rudolph? I think it was Mason Rudolph. With a competent quarterback, with a guy as cool, calm, and collected as Cam Ward is, Calvin Ridley is just going to get fed. And I don't think there is, there's been some positive buzz about Eli Manor. Not there yet with him. I've been lower on Eli. I don't think he has the physicality, or he didn't in college, to really be an NFL starter, but I've been wrong before and I'll be wrong again, right? So I think Calvin Ridley is going to be the biggest benefactor of Cam Ward. That's why I'm predicting a huge season for him. And I think this Tennessee offense might just look a little bit better than what we're expecting, right? My next wide receiver hot take is that no Green Bay wide receiver will finish in the top 24 fantasy points for the second year in a row. Now, to be fair, I have been low on Matthew Golden since the draft. I liked Matthew Golden's film. He was in my top 5. Him and Trey Harris were back and forth. Kind of preferred Trey Harris a little bit because that's more of the wide receiver that I enjoy. We'll talk about Trey here shortly. But Matthew Golden doesn't really fit the wide receiver type 1 role that I think Green Bay needed. Right? They have a bunch of guys who I think are very solid. Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs, Christian Watson when healthy. Dontavian Wicks, get him out of here. I don't even have to mention his name. I think this is an offense that's going to spread the ball around. You got Tucker Kraft. Everybody predicts to be the next big thing in the tight end position. Not necessarily there yet, but the way people are predicting it, that's going to take away from Matthew Golden. I think Romeo Dobbs is it's every time you hear Jordan Love talk, he brings up Romeo Dobbs, right? I think that's his guy. I just think this is a team that will spread the football around. Will get a lot of people involved, and then they still have Josh Jacobs as their running back, who is one of the best running backs in all of football. Let's not get it twisted here. He is just a guy who's going to be consistent every single year, or at least in recent years. He did have some fumbles here and there, year in and year out with Oakland, but I do think he is. I do think this offense is just a spread the ball around, everybody eats, and that doesn't really get to fantasy success as much as NFL success. So I do think that there is a world where we do not have a Green Bay wide receiver in the top 24 again for the second year in a row. My next one, speaking of Trey Harris, brought him up. Trey Harris will have the most touchdowns for a rookie wide receiver this season. Is that a bit spicy? Absolutely, because everything about Trey Harris this offseason has been extremely negative. Drops in camp, the addition of Keenan Allen, right? I think they play two completely different roles. If you watch or even look at the stats of Trey Harris, drops have never been an issue. I think he's got extremely strong hands. I think this is more of a training camp issue than it is a real life issue. I do think Trey Harris turns that around. And the reason why I think he gets that's why it's part of my hot takes, is that why he gets the most touchdowns for a rookie is because he adds a different dimension than both Ladd and Keenan Allen, right? This is a guy in Trey Harris who can win those jump balls, win those 50-50 balls, can, win down the sideline. I'm not saying that Ladd and Keenan Allen can't. That's not their Matt Forte, right? Trey Harris is also a guy in the red zone that could play bully ball. And that's kind of what they needed in the Chargers last year. They didn't really have a guy that they could just constantly feed in the red zone from a pass catching option. I do think Trey adds that ability. And again, he's a guy who's really good after the catch too. So I think we're undervaluing Trey Harris. He's a very sneaky player for me. I think, again, he adds a different dimension that both Ladd and Keenan Allen bring. And, those two prime route runners just will carve you up all day. But the big play is going to be big play Trey, right? So, again, I think he is my hot take. He finishes as the most touchdowns scored by a rookie wide receiver this year, Trey Harris. Let's get into the tight ends as we're running a little bit low on time. Got to get something to eat. Got to get the food ready for the Eagles taking on the Dallas Cowboys tonight. My next one to the tight end position. Evan Ingram will be a top 4 fantasy scorer for the tight end position. When healthy, Evan Ingram is an absolute matchup nightmare, right? And this is a position of need for the Denver Broncos in the past couple of years. They had hopes for Greg Dulcich. Unfortunately, he couldn't stay healthy. Adam Trautman really hasn't been the answer. Lucas Kroll, big body tight end, really wasn't the answer either. So the Broncos have been waiting for this position, a guy who can just eat up the middle of the field. And guess what? The slot position just kind of opened up in the Denver Broncos offense because of the move on from Devon Vele. If you put Evan Ingram in the slot, he is going to absolutely feast. I think that he will be the middle of the field target for Bo Nix. Bo Nix, throughout his career, college, NFL, is a guy who likes to get the football out quickly. And I think that benefits a guy like Evan Ingram, a guy who feasts around the middle of the field, feasts the short to intermediate routes, can feast after the catch. I am very excited for Evan Ingram this year. And I'm talking about 4. He probably is number 4, right? Maybe even 2. Who knows? Because this offense is going to be pretty good, or is going to be very good this year in Denver. So I think things open up for Evan Ingram. I think this helps Bo Nix. I think, this is just all systems go for this position in Denver. So again, top 4 finish for Evan Ingram. My hot take, and I think that's the easiest one out of all the hot takes I've had so far. And my last one for the tight end position, Tyler Warren leads the Colts in receptions. Yes, you heard it here, right? Tyler Warren will have more receptions than everyone's favorite, Josh Downs. He will have more receptions than Michael Pittman. He will have more receptions than Adonai Mitchell, and Jonathan Taylor is not the most efficient pass-catching running back. He can do it. It's just not something that they ask him to do a lot of. I think Tyler Warren will lead the Colts in receptions this year, and I don't think it really matters to me who the quarterback is. The quarterback right now is Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is a guy who keeps the ball short in the short-range throws, according to PFF. 48.1% and 58% of Jones's passes the past 2 years have been 0 to 9 yards, and that fits right into the Swiss Army knife that is Tyler Warren. So Tyler Warren leads the Indianapolis Colts in all receptions. Honestly, I almost even said fantasy points, but I think Jonathan Taylor's primed to have that one. So to me, Tyler Warren, leading them in receptions is a hot take because of the players that they have, but I think it's very doable. I think this is something that could happen. But again, it remains to be seen. And just so happens, we get football again, like I mentioned, just about an hour. We get our first football game, Eagles, Cowboys. I'm very excited for this season. I can't believe that it's finally here, right? If you listen to this full episode, if you watched along, if you listen to it on your audio, I just want to let every single one of you know, whether it's 5 people, 100 people, I don't give a shit. I just love the fact that you guys listen to me ramble on for almost an hour, right? So every single second you guys listening to me, I just appreciate it, the hell out of every single one of it, or every single bit of it. I don't know how to fucking talk, so I should probably end it here now. But the way Rich and I love to end every episode is mental health matters. Your mental health matters. Make sure you're talking to someone, whether it be a family member, a friend, your pet. Doesn't matter. Just make sure you're talking to someone. It can be me. My DMs are always open. Rich's DMs are open. I have no problem talking to anyone, especially as someone who struggles with mental health himself. Just remember that somebody out there loves you and you matter. So for the Dynasty Dogs and for the Fantasy Football Universe, I will see you guys next week. Have a good night.